Dr. Helen Marsh sat in her lab at the International Xenobiology Institute in Geneva, staring at samples under her microscope. The work was slow and careful, examining tissue from various alien species that humanity had met over the past 10 years. Since Earth joined the galactic community, her job had become endlessly fascinating. Every species had unique biology, different ways of living, different cellular structures. She loved discovering these differences. The alarm cut through the quiet lab like a knife. Helen jumped, nearly knocking over a sample tray. Red lights flashed along the walls. Her computer screen switched automatically to an emergency broadcast. Her hands went cold as she read the message scrolling across the screen. 30 warships had entered Earth's solar system. They were Kryn vessels. Helen felt her stomach drop. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Kryn. They were warriors, conquerors, unstoppable. Over the past century, they had taken 17 worlds. Nobody could stand against them. Their technology was far beyond most species. Their soldiers were stronger and faster than almost any other beings in known space. And now they were here. The broadcast continued. The Kryn had sent a single message to Earth. It was short and brutal. Surrender completely within 72 hours, or face total destruction. No negotiation. No discussion. Just a demand. Helen watched as the news feeds multiplied across her screen. Military bases worldwide were activating. Defense fleets were scrambling into position around Earth and its moon. Diplomats were trying desperately to open channels of communication with the Kryn ships. Every attempt was ignored, or met with the same repeated demand: surrender or die. She left her lab and walked through the facility halls. Other scientists clustered around screens, their faces pale with fear. Dr. Philip Grant, her colleague for the past 5 years, stood with a group near the main conference room. "This is bad," Philip said when he saw her. "Really bad. I've been reading the reports. The Kryn destroyed the Talmor homeworld 3 years ago. 5 billion people gone in less than a week." Helen nodded slowly. She had read those reports too. The Talmor had tried to fight. They had one of the strongest military forces in their sector. It hadn't mattered. The Kryn crushed them completely. "What can Earth possibly do?" another scientist asked. "Our weapons are decades behind theirs. We only joined the galactic community 10 years ago. We're like children compared to them." Nobody had an answer. Helen returned to her lab as the sun set over Geneva. The city below was in chaos. She could see streams of vehicles leaving, people evacuating while they still had time. Some believed running would help. Helen wasn't sure anywhere on Earth would be safe if the Kryn decided to attack. She sat at her workstation, but she couldn't focus on her regular research. Instead, she pulled up every file the galactic database had on the Kryn species. There had to be something. Some piece of information that could help. Most of the files focused on their military capabilities. Ship designs, weapon systems, battle tactics, details of past conquests. Helen skimmed through these quickly. Earth's military leaders would be studying those same files, looking for weaknesses. She doubted they would find any that 17 other worlds hadn't already discovered. She dug deeper, looking for biological information. The Kryn were large beings, averaging 7 feet tall with dense muscle structure. Their homeworld had higher gravity than Earth, which made them naturally stronger. They could see in a wider light spectrum than humans. Their reaction times were faster. On and on the list went, each detail more intimidating than the last. But Helen kept reading. She wasn't looking for military advantages. She was looking for understanding. What made the Kryn who they were? Where did they come from? How did they live? Hours passed. The building grew quiet as other staff members left, heading home to be with their families. Helen barely noticed. She moved from file to file, pulling up studies of Kryn biology, their evolutionary history, their homeworld conditions before it became uninhabitable. That was when she found the first odd detail. The Kryn homeworld had died over 300 years ago. Environmental collapse. According to the records, they had achieved space travel just in time to evacuate their population. Since then, they had been moving from world to world, never staying long, always searching for something. Helen frowned at her screen. What were they searching for? They conquered worlds. But they didn't seem to settle them permanently. They would take a planet, stay for a decade or two, then move on to the next conquest. That pattern didn't make sense for a species looking for a new home. She pulled up more files. Kryn population statistics showed something strange. Their numbers had been stable for the past 2 centuries. Not growing, not declining significantly, just stable. For a species that controlled multiple worlds, that seemed unusual. Most successful species expanded their population when they had more resources and territory. Helen opened a file on Kryn reproduction. The information was limited. Most species that studied the Kryn focused on their warriors and their weapons, not their personal lives. But there was a biological survey done 80 years ago by a Velshan research team. The Velshan were known for their thorough scientific work. She read through the survey slowly, her frown deepening with each paragraph. Kryn reproduction required specific environmental conditions. The survey listed the requirements: temperature range, atmospheric composition, and something about electromagnetic frequencies. The notes were technical and dense. Helen sat back in her chair, thinking. She opened another file, this one about the Kryn homeworld's unique properties. The planet had possessed an unusual magnetic field, much stronger than Earth's, with a specific frequency signature generated by its core composition. A thought began forming in her mind. She pulled up the reproductive survey again, comparing the data. The electromagnetic frequency required for Kryn reproduction matched almost exactly with the magnetic field frequency of their dead homeworld. She checked the dates. The last recorded Kryn birth was 208 years ago. Helen felt her heart start to race. She ran searches through the database, looking for any information about Kryn children, about their families, about birth rates on the worlds they conquered. The data was scarce, but what she found confirmed her growing suspicion. There were no Kryn children. None reported, none seen, none mentioned in any survey of the past 2 centuries. She pulled up surveys of the 17 conquered worlds. Each had different magnetic field properties. Each had been studied and modified by the Kryn. Massive engineering projects, attempting to alter planetary magnetic fields. Each project had failed. Helen stood up from her desk, her hands shaking slightly. She looked at her screen, at the data spread across multiple windows, and felt pieces of a horrible puzzle clicking into place. The Kryn weren't conquerors by choice. They were desperate. Their entire species was dying, unable to reproduce, searching frantically for a world that could sustain their biological needs. Every invasion was an attempt to find a home where they could have children again. Every failure drove them to the next world. Helen barely slept that night. She ran calculations over and over, checking her theory from every angle. By dawn, she was certain. The data was clear. The Kryn were a dying species, and they had no idea that Earth might be their answer. The question was how to convince anyone that her theory mattered. At 8 in the morning, she sent urgent requests for a meeting with the Defense Council. She marked it as critical. To her surprise, they granted her 15 minutes at noon. They probably thought she had information about Kryn weaknesses or battle tactics. Helen knew her actual theory would sound insane to them. Commander Victor Kane ran the Defense Council meeting. He was a career military man, tall and solid, with gray starting to show at his temples. Around the table sat generals, admirals, and senior diplomats. They all looked exhausted. None of them had slept much either. Dr. Marsh, Kane said, checking his watch. You have 15 minutes. We hope you have something useful. Our simulations all show the same result. If the Kryn attack, Earth falls in less than a week. Helen connected her tablet to the room's display system. Graphs and charts appeared on the large screens. I've been studying Kryn biology, she began. Specifically, their reproductive biology. Several people around the table frowned. A general named Patricia Webb spoke up. Doctor, we're planning a defense against an invasion fleet. How does their reproduction matter? Because they can't reproduce, Helen said simply. Not for the past 200 years. The room went very quiet. Everyone stared at her. Helen brought up her data. The Kryn require specific environmental conditions to reproduce. Specifically, an electromagnetic frequency that matches their original homeworld. That planet died 3 centuries ago. Every world they've conquered since then, they've tried to recreate those conditions. Every attempt has failed. Kane leaned forward. You're saying the most dangerous species in the galaxy is dying out? Yes. There hasn't been a Kryn child born in over 2 centuries. Every Kryn alive today is from the last generation born on their homeworld. They're not invading worlds for conquest. They're searching for a place where they can have children again. A diplomat named George Liu shook his head. Even if this is true, how does it help us? They'll still destroy Earth if we don't surrender. Helen took a deep breath. Earth's magnetic field, combined with our solar radiation patterns, produces a frequency very close to what the Kryn need, closer than any of the 17 worlds they've conquered. That's why they're here. She pulled up more charts. With some modifications, some amplification of Earth's natural magnetic field in specific areas, I believe we could create an environment where Kryn reproduction would be possible again. The room erupted. Multiple people started talking at once. Kane held up his hand for silence. Dr. Marsh, let me understand this clearly. You're proposing we help the species that's threatening to destroy us? I'm proposing we offer them what they desperately need, Helen said, not through conquest, but through cooperation. If we can prove Earth can solve their reproductive crisis, they won't need to invade. They'll negotiate. Webb, the general, looked skeptical. Why wouldn't they just take what they need by force? That's what they've always done. Because force hasn't worked for them for 200 years, Helen replied. Every world they've taken by force has failed to give them what they need. Maybe they're ready to try a different approach. Ambassador Lyra appeared on one of the communication screens. The Velshan diplomat had been observing the meeting remotely. Her species valued pure logic above all else. Dr. Marsh's theory is scientifically sound, Lyra said, her translated voice calm and measured. I've reviewed her data. The Kryn reproductive requirements match her conclusions. However, there is a significant logical problem. The Kryn have never negotiated. They conquer or they destroy. They show no weakness, accept no compromise. How do you propose to even communicate this offer to them? Helen had been dreading this question, because she knew her answer would sound crazy. I'll go to them myself, she said quietly. I'll take a shuttle to their flagship. I'll present my research directly to their commander. The room exploded again. Kane stood up. Absolutely not. That's suicide. They'll kill you the moment you board their ship. Maybe, Helen admitted. But maybe they won't. If I'm right about their desperation, if they truly are a dying species, they might listen. They might be willing to hear an alternative to conquest. Philip Grant, who had been allowed into the meeting at Helen's request, spoke for the first time. Helen, this is insane. You're talking about walking onto a warship full of beings who could tear you apart without effort. Even if they don't kill you immediately, why would they believe you? Why would they trust a human? Because I'll bring proof, Helen said. All the data, all the biological surveys, everything that shows I understand their problem. And because I'll be unarmed and alone. If I meant them harm, I wouldn't come to them defenseless. Kane paced to the window, looking out at the city below. And if you're wrong? If they kill you and then attack anyway? Then we're no worse off than we are now, Helen said. Right now, we have no options. In 60 hours, the Kryn deadline expires. Our military can't stop them. Our diplomats can't reach them. This is the only thing I can think of that might work. Lyra's voice came through the speakers again. The logic is sound, if uncomfortable. Dr. Marsh's approach cannot make the situation worse, and there is a small probability it could succeed. However, I must note that the Kryn have a history of rejecting help. 200 years ago, another species attempted to aid them with their reproductive crisis. The Kryn shared their vulnerability, and that species used the information to attempt subjugation. The Kryn destroyed them completely and vowed never to show weakness again. Helen felt a chill run down her spine. I didn't know that. Few do. The records are old, and both species involved are now extinct. But it explains Kryn behavior. They learned that showing vulnerability leads to exploitation. Then I need to prove humans are different, Helen said. That we won't exploit their weakness. That we genuinely want to help. Kane turned back from the window. This is the craziest plan I've ever heard. But we're out of options. And out of time. He looked at Helen directly. If you're willing to risk this, I won't stop you. But I want it on record that I think this is extremely dangerous and likely to fail. Noted, Helen said. The next 6 hours passed in a blur. Helen prepared her presentation, organizing all her research into a clear format. She worked with Philip to triple-check every calculation, every piece of data. She couldn't afford any errors. As evening fell, she walked to the shuttle bay. A small diplomatic craft waited, fueled and ready. Kane met her there, along with a handful of other officials. We'll be monitoring everything, Kane said. If things go wrong, if they attack you, we'll try to get you out. Helen nodded. Though they both knew rescue would be impossible if the Kryn decided to kill her. She climbed into the shuttle, her hands steady despite her racing heart. The systems powered up smoothly. She ran through the pre-flight checks, then opened a communication channel to the Kryn flagship. This is Dr. Helen Marsh of Earth, she said, her voice clear despite her fear. I'm a xenobiologist. I've been studying your species. I know why you're really here, and I know how to help you. I'm requesting permission to come aboard your ship. I'm unarmed. I'm alone. And I'm carrying information that could save your species. For a long moment, there was only silence. Helen waited, barely breathing. Then a harsh, grating voice responded. It spoke in halting human language. The Kryn flagship was enormous. As Helen's shuttle drew closer, the true scale of it became overwhelming. The ship was easily 3 miles long, its dark metal hull covered in weapon ports and armor plating. Her shuttle looked like an insect approaching a mountain. A docking bay opened in the ship's side. A massive hangar that could have held 50 shuttles the size of hers. Automated systems guided her craft inside. The moment she crossed the threshold, the bay doors closed behind her with a sound like thunder. Helen landed the shuttle and sat for a moment, her hands gripping the controls. This was it. Once she stepped outside, there was no turning back. She took a deep breath, released her harness, and gathered her data tablet. The shuttle ramp lowered. Helen walked down into the hangar bay. 6 Kryn warriors waited for her. They stood perfectly still, watching her with eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Each one was massive, easily 7 feet tall, with thick armor covering their bodies. They carried weapons that looked capable of destroying a building. Helen stopped at the bottom of the ramp. She kept her hands visible, holding only her tablet. I'm Dr. Helen Marsh. Thank you for allowing me to come aboard. One of the warriors gestured sharply. The meaning was clear enough. Follow. Helen walked between the warriors through corridors that seemed designed for giants. Everything was oversized from her perspective. The ceiling was 12 feet high. The doorways were wide enough for 3 Kryn to walk side by side. The walls were bare metal, with no decoration or comfort. This was a warship, built for function and strength. They walked for nearly 10 minutes, passing other Kryn along the way. All of them stopped to stare at Helen. She heard low growling sounds, conversations in their own language that her translator couldn't quite catch. She felt very small and very vulnerable. Finally, they reached a larger chamber. The warriors stopped outside. One of them touched a panel, and the door slid open. Enter, a voice growled from inside. Helen stepped into what was clearly a command center. Displays covered the walls, showing views of Earth, tactical data, ship systems. In the center of the room stood a Kryn larger than any she had seen so far. This one wore no armor, only a dark uniform marked with symbols that Helen guessed indicated rank. I am Commander Zekthara, the Kryn said, speaking human language with a thick accent. You are the scientist who claims to understand the Kryn. You have 5 minutes to explain before I have you thrown out of the airlock. Helen's heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. I've studied your biological records. I know about your reproductive crisis. Zekthara's eyes narrowed. It was the first real reaction Helen had seen from any Kryn. You know nothing. I know your species hasn't produced a child in 208 years, Helen said. I know you require a specific electromagnetic frequency to reproduce, one that matched your homeworld's magnetic field. I know you've conquered 17 worlds trying to recreate those conditions. And I know every attempt has failed. The commander moved toward her with frightening speed. Helen forced herself not to step back. Zekthara leaned down, bringing their face close to hers. You have been spying, stealing our data, attempting to find weakness to exploit. No, Helen said firmly. Your biological data is in the Galactic database. It's public information. Most species just never looked at it carefully because they only saw you as warriors. But I'm a xenobiologist. I look at biology, and I saw the truth that everyone else missed. Zekthara straightened but didn't move away. And what truth is that, small human? That you're not invaders by choice. You're desperate. You're a dying species, and you've been searching for 300 years for a way to survive. The chamber went absolutely silent. Helen could hear her own breathing, her own heartbeat. Zekthara stared at her with an expression she couldn't read. Even if this were true, the commander said slowly, why would you share such understanding? We are your enemy. We have given you a deadline to surrender or die. Helen pulled up data on her tablet, projecting it onto the room's displays. Charts and graphs appeared, showing magnetic field comparisons, biological requirements, planetary analyses. Earth's magnetic field, combined with our solar radiation patterns, produces an electromagnetic signature very similar to your homeworld. Not identical, but closer than any of the 17 worlds you've taken. With some modifications, some amplification in controlled areas, I believe we can create an environment where Kryn reproduction would be possible again. She turned to face Zekthara directly. I'm offering you a solution. Not through conquest, but through cooperation. You don't need to destroy Earth. You need to work with us. Zekthara made a sound that might have been laughter, but it held no humor. You offer this freely? You expect me to believe humans would help the species threatening to destroy them? This is manipulation. This is a trick to make us lower our guard. It's not a trick, Helen said. It's compassion. I can't imagine what it's like to watch your entire species fade away. To know that your generation is the last. To be so desperate that conquest seems like the only option left. For a moment, something flickered across Zekthara's face. Pain, perhaps, or exhaustion. But it vanished quickly, replaced by cold anger. You understand nothing about the Kryn. We are warriors. We are strong. We take what we need. And has that worked? Helen asked quietly. 17 worlds conquered, and still no children. Still no hope. How many more worlds will you destroy before you accept that force isn't solving your problem? Zekthara's hand moved to a weapon at their side. Helen's guards tensed. For a terrible moment, Helen thought she had pushed too far. But then Zekthara spoke, the words coming out harsh and bitter. Once, long ago, the Kryn showed vulnerability to another species. We shared our crisis. We asked for help. That species promised aid, then used our weakness to attempt enslavement. We destroyed them completely. We vowed never to trust again, never to show weakness again. Better to die as warriors than to be betrayed again. Helen felt understanding wash over her. I'm sorry that happened to your people. Truly. But not every species is the same. Humans believe that extinction is too terrible a fate for any thinking species, even one threatening us. We believe cooperation is stronger than conquest. Words, Zekthara said. Easy words from a soft species. Then let me prove it, Helen said. Let your scientists come to Earth. Let them examine our magnetic field themselves. Let them verify my research. If I'm wrong, you lose nothing but time. If I'm right, you could save your entire species. Zekthara turned away, moving to the displays showing Earth. The commander stared at the planet for a long time. Silent. Helen waited, barely daring to breathe. Why? Zekthara finally asked, not turning around. Why would one human scientist risk her life to save the Kryn? Your military leaders did not send you. Your government did not order this. You came alone. Why? Helen thought about the question. Because I look at alien species and see people, not threats. Because I study biology and see life struggling to continue. Just like life on Earth struggles, because the thought of an entire species dying out. Unable to have children. Unable to see a future. That breaks my heart. And because I believe that understanding is always better than destruction. Zekthara turned back to face her. The commander's expression was unreadable. You are either the bravest being I have ever encountered, or the most foolish. Probably both, Helen admitted. For the first time, Zekthara made a sound that might have been genuine laughter. It was harsh and brief, but it was there. I will send scientists to Earth, the commander said finally. They will verify your claims. If you are lying, if this is deception, humanity will suffer greatly. But if you speak truth, if Earth can give the Kryn commander Kane met Helen at the landing facility with a full security team. When the Kryn shuttle landed behind hers, carrying 4 Kryn scientists, half the security team raised their weapons. Stand down, Kane ordered sharply. He looked at Helen. I hope you know what you're doing. So do I, Helen admitted. The Kryn scientists emerged from their shuttle, moving with the same controlled power as the warriors, but carrying equipment cases instead of weapons. The lead scientist was slightly smaller than the others, with markings on her uniform that Helen had learned indicated scientific rank rather than military status. I am Tharwin, the Kryn said in careful human language. I am Chief Biological Specialist for the fleet. Commander Zekthara has ordered me to verify your claims about Earth's magnetic properties. Helen stepped forward, trying to project confidence she didn't fully feel. Welcome to Earth. I'm Dr. Helen Marsh. This is Commander Kane, head of our defense forces. We've prepared a testing site where you can conduct your research. The next 3 days were tense. News of the Kryn scientists on Earth spread quickly, causing panic in many cities. Protests erupted. People demanded to know why Earth was helping the enemy. Some called Helen a traitor. Others insisted the government was making a terrible mistake. Helen tried to ignore the noise and focus on the work. She had set up a research facility in northern Canada, far from major population centers. The location offered ideal conditions, strong magnetic field properties, and low population density in case something went wrong. Philip joined her at the facility, still skeptical but willing to help. The whole world thinks we're crazy, he said, watching Kryn scientists set up their equipment. Maybe we are, Helen replied. But what's the alternative? Let them attack? Let both species destroy each other? Tharwin approached them, carrying a device that hummed with energy. We are ready to begin baseline measurements. Dr. Marsh, explain your proposed modifications to Earth's natural magnetic field. Helen pulled up her designs on a portable display. Earth's magnetic field naturally fluctuates. What we need to do is amplify and stabilize specific frequencies in a controlled area. I've designed a series of field generators that work with Earth's natural magnetism rather than fighting against it. She walked Tharwin through the technical details, explaining the equipment, the power requirements, the projected field strength and stability. The Kryn scientist listened carefully, occasionally asking questions that showed deep understanding of the physics involved. Your approach is sound, Tharwin said finally. More elegant than our attempts to force magnetic field changes on conquered worlds. You work with the planet rather than against it. Cooperation instead of domination, Helen said. It's kind of a human theme. Tharwin's expression shifted slightly. Helen was getting better at reading Kryn faces. That looked like amusement. Over the next week, they built the field generation system. Human and Kryn scientists worked side by side, An impossible sight that was broadcast around the world. Helen watched Philip gradually lose his wariness as he worked with the Kryn team. They were brilliant scientists, asking insightful questions, suggesting improvements to the designs. "They're not what I expected," Philip admitted one evening. "I thought they'd be cold, brutal, but they're just people. Desperate people. But people." The field generators went online on the 8th day. Helen held her breath as power flowed through the system, creating an amplified magnetic field across a 10-mile radius. Monitors showed the frequency signature building, stabilizing, holding steady. Tharwin and her team moved through the field with sensitive equipment, taking readings, analyzing the electromagnetic properties. The process took hours. Helen paced nervously, unable to sit still. Finally, Tharwin approached her. The Kryn scientist's expression was unreadable. "The field is stable," Tharwin said. "The frequency matches our homeworld baseline, to within 0.3% variance. This is the closest match we have seen in over 200 years. Helen felt her heart racing. "Does that mean it could work? For reproduction? It means we must test." Tharwin paused. "I volunteer for the biological testing." The fertility testing took 2 weeks. Helen worked closely with Tharwin, conducting scans, taking samples, monitoring biological responses to the amplified field. It was delicate work, requiring trust between them. Tharwin had to share intimate details about Kryn biology, information that had been kept secret for centuries. Helen learned that Kryn reproduction was complex, requiring not just the right electromagnetic frequency but also specific hormonal responses triggered by that frequency. After 200 years without exposure to the correct conditions, Tharwin's body had to remember how to respond. They adjusted the field strength, fine-tuned the frequency, modified the harmonics. Each change required careful testing. Helen barely slept, living at the facility, working around the clock. Philip took over many of the technical adjustments, freeing Helen to focus on the biological monitoring. On the 14th day, test results showed undeniable changes in Tharwin's reproductive system. Hormone levels were shifting, cellular structures were activating, biological processes that had been dormant for 2 centuries were beginning to function again. Tharwin stared at the results on the medical display. Her hands shook slightly as she reached out to touch the screen. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she made a sound Helen had never heard from a Kryn before. It was somewhere between a laugh and a sob, raw and uncontrolled. The other Kryn scientists gathered around, looking at the results. One of them touched Tharwin's shoulder gently. "It works," Tharwin said, her voice breaking. "After 200 years, after 17 failed worlds, it works." Helen felt tears running down her own face. "We'll need to expand the field, test it over a larger area, verify the stability over time. But yes, it works." That evening, Tharwin found Helen sitting outside the facility, looking up at the stars. The Kryn scientist sat down beside her, moving carefully in the unfamiliar gesture. "I did not think I would ever feel hope again," Tharwin said quietly. "For my entire life, I have known my species was dying. I grew up understanding I would never have children, that the Kryn would end with my generation, and I accepted it because there was no other choice. And now?" Helen asked. "Now I dare to imagine a future. I dare to think about children, about the next generation, about Kryn who will grow up never knowing the despair we have carried." Tharwin turned to look at Helen. "You gave us this." One human scientist who looked at us and saw people instead of enemies. "I just saw the truth that was there," Helen said. "You were never really enemies. You were survivors, doing everything you could to keep your species alive." Tharwin made a sound that Helen now recognized as Kryn laughter. "The galaxy sees us as monsters, conquerors, destroyers, but we are just people who forgot how to ask for help, who learned that showing weakness led to betrayal. You reminded us that not all species are the same." Commander Zekthara arrived at the facility the next day with 3 more Kryn ships. The commander reviewed the test results personally, spending hours going through every detail of the research. When the review was complete, Zekthara stood before Helen and did something remarkable. The commander bowed, a deep formal gesture that made all the human observers gasp. "The Kryn acknowledge your gift, Dr. Helen Marsh. You have offered us what 300 years of searching could not provide. You have given us hope." The Galactic Council chambers on the Velshan homeworld were built for thousands. Today, every seat was filled. Representatives from hundreds of species had come to hear the impossible story of Earth and the Kryn. Helen stood at the speaker's platform, feeling small beneath the vast domed ceiling. She had never imagined speaking before the entire galactic community. She was a scientist, not a diplomat, but Ambassador Lyra had insisted. The galaxy needed to understand what had happened, and only Helen could explain it properly. 3 months ago, Helen began, her voice amplified across the chamber. The Kryn fleet arrived at Earth with a demand for unconditional surrender. Every military expert said resistance was hopeless. Every diplomat said negotiation was impossible. The Kryn had conquered 17 worlds. They had never shown mercy, never accepted compromise. She pulled up the biological data on the chamber's massive displays. "But I'm a xenobiologist. I don't study weapons or tactics. I study life. And when I looked at the Kryn, I didn't see unstoppable warriors. I saw a species in crisis." Helen walked the council through her research. The Kryn reproductive requirements, the 200 years without children, the desperate search across 17 conquered worlds for conditions that would allow their species to survive. The Kryn weren't invading Earth because they wanted to conquer us. They were invading because they were dying. And Earth's magnetic field was their last hope. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Many species had fought or fled from the Kryn over the centuries. The idea that the fearsome conquerors were actually desperate survivors was hard to accept. Ambassador Lyra, presiding over the session, spoke up. "Dr. Marsh, the Council recognizes your scientific achievement. But many members question the wisdom of Earth's choice. The Kryn have killed billions. They have destroyed civilizations. Why did humanity choose to help them rather than defend against them?" Helen had expected this question. She had thought about it often over the past 3 months. Because we looked beyond what the Kryn had done and asked why they did it. We saw people who had been betrayed when they showed vulnerability. Who learned to hide their weakness behind aggression. Who became trapped in a cycle of conquest because they couldn't imagine another way forward. She paused, looking around the chamber at hundreds of different alien faces. And we believed that any species capable of love for their own children, any species desperate enough to fight for survival, was worth trying to understand rather than destroy. Commander Zekthara stood from the Kryn delegation section. The commander's presence in the council chambers was unprecedented. For the first time in their recorded history, the Kryn were participating in galactic diplomatic proceedings. "Dr. Marsh speaks truth," Zekthara said, the words clear despite the harsh Kryn accent. "For 300 years, the Kryn have been dying. We conquered worlds out of desperation, not desire for empire. We destroyed civilizations in our search for survival, and each failure made us more brutal, more desperate." The commander looked at Helen. One human scientist saw what no one else did. "She risked her life to come aboard my ship. She offered hope when she could have offered weapons. She showed compassion when she could have shown fear." Zekthara turned to address the full council. "The Kryn have learned that strength alone cannot solve every problem. That sometimes, cooperation achieves what conquest cannot. Dr. Marsh taught us this lesson. Humanity taught us this lesson." A Talmor representative stood, anger clear in their posture. The Talmor had been one of the Kryn's conquest victims. "Beautiful words, Commander, but they do not bring back the billions your species killed. The Talmor homeworld is ash, because of the Kryn. No words can undo what was done," Zekthara acknowledged. "The Kryn carry the weight of those deaths. We cannot make the past right, but we can choose a different future. Earth has shown us that path." Lyra called for order as debate erupted across the chamber. It took several minutes for the noise to die down. "The Council will now vote on formal recognition of the Earth-Kryn Settlement Agreement," Lyra announced. The vote took hours. Some species supported it enthusiastically, seeing it as a new model for interspecies relations. Others opposed it, arguing that the Kryn's crimes should not be forgiven. Many abstained, uncertain what to think. In the end, the agreement was recognized by a slim majority. Earth and the Kryn colony would be acknowledged as a legitimate settlement. The Kryn would share their advanced technology with the galactic community as reparations for past conquests. Earth would provide ongoing research into magnetic field stabilization for other worlds that might need similar solutions. After the vote, Helen found herself surrounded by diplomats and scientists from dozens of species, all asking questions, seeking to understand exactly how she had achieved the impossible. A Velshan researcher named Krell approached her. "Dr. Marsh, I have studied your methodology extensively. The science is sound, even elegant. But I do not understand the emotional component. You risked your life for a species threatening your world. This is not logical behavior." Helen smiled. "Maybe not by pure logic. But humans don't operate on logic alone. We have something we call empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another being. When I looked at the Kryn, I imagined what it would feel like to be the last generation of humanity, to know there would be no children, no future. That pain was unbearable to imagine, so I tried to help." "Empathy," Krell repeated, testing the word. "The Velshan do not have this trait strongly. We value logic above emotion. Perhaps this is why we never saw what you saw. Different species have different strengths," Helen said. "The key is learning from each other." 6 months after the council meeting, Helen stood in northern Canada, watching construction crews work on expanding the magnetic field generators. The initial 10-mile radius had been increased to nearly 100 miles. Thousands of Kryn had settled in the area, building homes, establishing communities. Tharwin walked up beside her, moving with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in their environment. The Kryn scientist was visibly pregnant now, her body showing clear signs of the child growing within her. "The first Kryn birth on Earth will happen in approximately 6 weeks, Tharwin said, one hand resting protectively on her stomach. "The medical scans show the child is healthy and developing normally." Helen felt emotion tighten her throat. "How does it feel, knowing you'll be a mother?" "After believing your whole life it was impossible?" "Terrifying," Tharwin admitted. "I have no experience with children. No Kryn alive today does. We will have to learn everything from ancient records and from trial and error." She made the sound that Helen now recognized as Kryn laughter. "Perhaps human parents can teach us. Your species has not forgotten how to raise young." "I think both species will learn from each other," Helen said. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching human and Kryn workers cooperate on the construction. The initial wariness between the species had faded over the months. People discovered that Kryn liked human music. Kryn discovered that humans enjoyed their mathematical poetry. Children from both species played together at the edges of the construction site, inventing games that bridged the differences between them. Commander Kane visited the site regularly, overseeing the security arrangements. He approached Helen and Tharwin, looking satisfied. "The technology exchange is going well," he reported. "The Kryn medical advances alone are going to save millions of human lives. And their engineering techniques are decades ahead of ours." "And what are we giving them in return?" Helen asked, though she knew the answer. "A future," Kane said simply. "Children. Hope. Things they didn't have before." He shook his head in wonder. "Still can't believe this worked." One scientist with a theory changed everything. "It wasn't just the science," Helen said. "It was being willing to see past the fear to the truth underneath." Philip joined them, carrying tablets displaying the latest field stability readings. "Numbers are holding perfectly. We should be able to expand to a 200-mile radius within the year. That'll support a Kryn population of over 50,000. "And the other potential sites?" Tharwin asked. Commander Zekthara mentioned exploring additional locations. "We've identified 3 more areas with suitable magnetic properties," Philip confirmed. "Australia, northern Russia, and southern Argentina. All far from major human cities, but with excellent conditions for field generation." Helen watched the sun setting over the construction site, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Human and Kryn workers finished their shifts and headed toward the settlement together, talking and laughing despite the language barriers. This was what she had dreamed of when she flew alone toward the Kryn flagship, risking everything on a theory and a hope. Not just preventing a war, but building something new. A partnership between species, cooperation instead of conquest, understanding instead of fear. The news media had called her a hero. The Galactic Council had awarded her their highest honor for scientific achievement. Humanity had celebrated her as the person who saved Earth, but Helen didn't think of herself that way. She had simply done what any good scientist should do. She had looked at the evidence, formed a hypothesis, and tested it. She had seen a problem and worked to solve it. The fact that the problem was an alien invasion and the solution was compassion, well, that was just part of what made humanity human. Tharwin's child was born 7 weeks later. A healthy female, strong and perfect. Helen was there for the birth, watching Tharwin hold her daughter for the first time. The Kryn scientist wept openly. All pretense of warrior stoicism abandoned in the face of overwhelming joy. "What will you name her?" Helen asked. Tharwin looked up, tears still flowing. "Her name is Kellen. In the old Kryn language, it means hope," the child cried, healthy and loud, her voice announcing a new generation. Around the birthing room, Kryn and human medical staff celebrated together. The sound of new life, impossible for so long, filled the space with joy. Helen stepped outside, needing air, needing a moment to process the emotion. She found Commander Zekthara standing in the corridor, staring at the door to the birthing room. "You should go in," Helen said gently. "Be there for your people at this moment." "I feared I would never see this day," Zekthara said quietly. "I became a warrior because there was nothing else to be. Our species was ending. All we could do was fight, conquer, search desperately for salvation we never found." The commander turned to Helen. "You gave us this moment. You saw the people behind the warriors. You offered understanding when you could have offered only resistance." "I just looked for the truth," Helen said, "and tried to help when I found it. That is what makes your species remarkable," Zekthara said. "Not your weapons or your technology. Your ability to look at an enemy and see a person in need of help. The galaxy has spent centuries trying to understand human nature. Perhaps this is the answer. You lead with compassion, even in the face of fear." Helen smiled. "We're not perfect. We make mistakes. We have our own problems to solve, but we try to believe in understanding, in cooperation, in the possibility that different people can work together. The galaxy is learning from your example," Zekthara said. 3 other species have already contacted Earth, asking for help with problems they had kept hidden. They see what happened with the Kryn, and they dare to hope for different solutions. From inside the birthing room came the sound of Kryn voices raised in traditional song, welcoming new life. It was a sound that hadn't been heard in over 200 years, now ringing through a human facility on Earth, blending human and alien voices in celebration. Helen listened to the song and thought about the future, a future where different species worked together, where problems were solved through understanding rather than force, where compassion was seen as strength rather than weakness. The galaxy had struggled to understand how one human scientist stopped an alien invasion. They analyzed the science, studied the diplomacy, examined the strategy, but they were looking in the wrong places. Helen hadn't stopped the Kryn with superior technology or clever tactics. She had stopped them by seeing them as people, by offering hope instead of fear, by believing that even in the darkest circumstances, cooperation was possible. And in the end, that belief had changed everything. "So the invasion is called off?" Commander Kane asked, tension clear in his voice. "There will be no invasion," Zekthara confirmed. "Instead, I request negotiations. The Kryn wish to establish a colony on Earth within the stabilized magnetic field. In exchange, we will share our technology, our knowledge, our strength. We will be allies, not conquerors." Kane looked at Helen, who nodded. This was what she had hoped for, dreamed of. barely dared to believe possible. Then let's talk about how two species can share a world, Kane said. News spread across Earth within hours. The Kryn fleet was withdrawing from attack positions. Negotiations were beginning. Humanity had avoided destruction not through weapons but through science and compassion. The galaxy watched in confusion and wonder, struggling to understand how one human scientist had achieved the impossible. What 300 years of searching has not, then perhaps there is another way forward. Helen felt relief flood through her so strongly her knees nearly buckled. Thank you, Commander. My government is prepared to provide whatever access your scientists need. One more thing, Dr. Marsh. Zekthara moved closer again. If this succeeds, if the Kryn can reproduce on Earth, my species will remember that it was you who offered hope when all others offered only weapons and fear. The Kryn do not forget debts. I don't need gratitude, Helen said. I just need both our species to survive. She was escorted back to her shuttle under the watchful eyes of Kryn warriors. As her craft launched from the flagship and turned toward Earth, Helen allowed herself to shake, releasing the fear she had been holding inside. She opened a communication channel to Commander Kane. I'm returning to Earth. And I'm bringing Kryn scientists with me. G-word carefully formed. You may approach, human scientist. If you are lying, you will die. If you are wasting our time, you will die. If you are attempting deception, you will die. Helen swallowed hard. Understood. I'm launching now. She guided the shuttle out of the bay and up through Earth's atmosphere. Behind her, the planet fell away, beautiful and fragile. Ahead, the Kryn fleet waited, 30 massive warships bristling with weapons, each one capable of destroying entire cities. Helen set her course for the flagship and accelerated forward, carrying nothing but hope and data into the heart of humanity's greatest threat. Next desperate attempt. She checked Earth's magnetic field properties, comparing them to the Kryn homeworld data. Her breath caught. Earth's field, combined with solar radiation patterns, produced a frequency remarkably close to what the Kryn needed. Not perfect, but closer than any of the conquered worlds. That was why they were here. Helen sat back down, her mind racing. If she was right, if the Kryn were dying out, unable to reproduce, then this invasion wasn't about conquest at all. It was about survival. It was a last, desperate attempt by a species facing extinction. The question was, what could she possibly do with this information?